I am Heidi Prowse, and I am the CEO of MIEACT, and it is my absolute great pleasure to be the co-host of this session with the Community Services Directorate, our Community Resilience team. For those of you who haven't heard about us before, for 25 years, MIEACT, a local not-for-profit, has created a safe space for mental health education for Canberrans of all ages. We run free awareness sessions for Canberra businesses with funding from ACT Health, as well as having a range of programs offered both face-to-face and online for workplace mental health that can be customised to suit your workplace. What makes MIEACT unique is all of our program fees are then paid forward back to our Canberra community, and that helps us reach another classroom. This year, it has meant we've been able to offer programs to frontline community and healthcare workers, and we continue to reach 90% of ACT's secondary schools. To kick things off today, I would like to welcome and thank Yvette Berry MLA, Minister for Women, for attending our session and ask her to provide an opening address.
Hi everyone, how are you going? Just a thumbs up for feeling all right or not so much, or a bit of both. Thanks MIEACT for putting this on and for partnering up with the ACT government today. I want to begin by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land, the Ngunnawal people, and pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging. And I'd like to acknowledge and pay my respects to any Aboriginal people who are on this event with us today, and of course acknowledge and respect the significant contribution they make to the life of this city and this region. Thank you everyone, for all the panellists as well, who are going to be making some really wonderful contributions today. I sort of was having a look at this event and having a think about what I would say in my speech at the start, and just to acknowledge that there has been no other challenges quite like this year. It has definitely been different and a tough one for many of us. And all of us have experienced some kind of anxiety at one point along or another along the way. So I acknowledge that, and that we're still not through it all, and we've still got a bit of a way to go. Today I'm talking about this international health pandemic and its impact, and that it hasn't had a gender neutral impact either, and that women have been affected more greatly throughout of it. Those harmful gendered stereotypes have meant that women have shouldered more than their share of unpaid work and responsibilities, that they are more represented than ever before in casualised and insecure workforces. But it is also a chance, a perfect opportunity for us to actually restart reshaping things and having and changing the way things are, and changing those stereotypes that have become so embedded in our lives before the pandemic, but have now started an even more stronger, powerful conversation about what we can do together to get ourselves through that, and to be at a different place. When I was just watching that YouTube video, I thought, far out, I think I spoke to every single one of those women over the last 12 months, and all the different experiences and the diversity of experiences that women have had throughout this pandemic is going to need a diversity of responses as well. So, you know, when I was calling or meeting or, you know, meeting with people online, I was talking to, you know, single parents who didn't necessarily experience the same kind of isolation as perhaps somebody who went off to work every day, who were at home generally, but then didn't have the chance to get a break away from life and home because their children were now at home with them, and they were having to do, you know, keeping their children safe and happy during a remote education. People who were in work and who were used to going out and going to the gym or to the restaurant or whatever it was, they were feeling even more restricted because they couldn't do any of those things anymore. Of course, we saw that women were valued differently throughout the pandemic as well. We had predominantly female workforces of health and education workers who were really at the front line, carrying on as normal almost, but really being such an important part of our navigating our way through it. And then we had other workers who were just seemingly dumped into the middle of the whole thing, like the early childhood sector, there to provide the chance for other families who provided that essential work to go to work and have their children educated and cared for, but can't even afford to have their own children in early childhood education in any case because their wages are so low. So their whole feeling of being disrespected throughout this whole pandemic is something that will take some time to overcome, I reckon. But one of the most outstanding things was the invisible workforce of cleaners, mostly women, mostly migrant workers, all of a sudden became the most important, most essential workforce getting us through this international health pandemic. So quite an outstanding turnaround for a group of people who usually move through our buildings and offices and classrooms and schools and hospitals quietly and unseen, were now front and centre and so important to getting through the pandemic. So a whole variety of different experiences that women have experienced, and we need to listen to every single one of them and find ways to support them in different ways. So, so I guess for today, I'm really interested to hearing other people's experiences through the pandemic, talking about what are the things that we need to do better. I really loved the comment by the woman there that was on the YouTube video of, you know, we do actually need to take it a bit easier on ourselves, but we need support to do that as well by removing some of those gendered norms that still exist. And I think maybe our message to women is to not sweat the small stuff, but then how do we get the support to be able to not sweat the small stuff when it's just piles on over, you know, up and up and up, and it just keeps building and building and building. So yes, they're all the issues. Now it's up to you to come up with all of the solutions and how we're going to work together to support women as we come out the other side of this international health pandemic. So thank you, MIEACT. Thank you, Heidi, and also to all the wonderful panellists. I can't wait to hear what you come up with, and I'm looking forward to hearing the questions that will be asked as well. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Minister. And I absolutely have to have a little bit of a shout out to the incredible women in that video at the beginning who stand side by side me every day at MIEACT. It is a privilege to work with them, and we definitely learn from each other. So in this session, we are going to look at how paid and unpaid workloads have changed in 2020 and the impacts on wellbeing, particularly for women. We will look at the positives and challenges coming out of the current environment, discuss how roles have changed from a range of perspectives and how we have and can respond to those changes as individuals, as partners, and as organisations, and importantly, provide strategies and resources on how to identify and respond to the shifting balance. So I am excited to introduce you all to the lineup of speakers we have on this topic today. And I might just start with Wijewickrema, who is one of our country's most recognisable social entrepreneurs, a co-founder of Gigi's Flowers and Hampers. She is passionate about empowering and employing people with special needs from all walks of life. She is a multi-award winner recognised for her work, including the 2016 ACT Young Australian of the Year. And I know that we can't all be in the same room together. However, we have chosen a lucky door prize winner. Emma from Synergy Group will be getting a very beautiful arrangement delivered to you today from Gigi's Flowers, and we hope that they brighten your day. We also have Helen Piggott, who is a union delegate and hospital cleaner. Helen's women-dominated industry and workplace faced massive health and safety risks through the pandemic. Helen cares for her family and knows that working together is the way we can stay strong. Ginger Gorman is a fearless and multi-award-winning social justice journalist. She regularly writes stories, makes radio and TV for media outlets such as news.com.au, Fairfax Online, The Guardian, The Big Smoke, and the ABC. In 2013, Ginger experienced online hate firsthand. It was this experience that set Ginger on her professional journey into the world of trolls. She released her first and my personal favourite book, Troll Hunting, in 2019. And rounding out our panel is Dr. Lyndall Strazdins, who is a professor and ARC Future Fellow at the Research School of Population Health at the ANU. She is a recognised leader in the field of work, family and wellbeing, especially the role played by work time and the pressures and health challenges for families to combine work with caring, or for young adults to combine work with study. Her research focuses on contemporary predicaments of work and care and their health and equity consequences, viewing health as interlinked within families. So let's jump straight into some questions, and I'd love to start with Ginger. So what has been 2020 and how did 2020 change things?
Oh, thank you, Heidi, and thank you for the work that you do at MIEACT, and also to the other panelists, Helen, Nip and Lyndall. And I also just wanted to say this always was and always will be Aboriginal land. So this year started, am I allowed to swear, Heidi? Mildly. This year started and it was a real shit show for me. So I had recently separated from my husband, and at that time I was living with my two little girls full time when the pandemic hit, and obviously we'd had the horrendous fires. We're all very anxious, and I remember the first 2 weeks of the pandemic when we were in lockdown, and it was an absolute nightmare. So I'm a freelancer, right? And I had both the kids at home. I lost $60,000 of work overnight. I was scraping together new work. I thought I was going to be in the Centrelink line and lose my house. And I was madly trying to do whatever work I could scrape together. And my kids were running riot. And there was this one day I could hear them screaming, but I couldn't get off these Zoom calls. And I came out at about 3 o'clock and there was kinetic sand like all over my house, and they were pulling each other's hair out because I hadn't fed them. And so they were screaming, and there was tea all over my house because my daughter had been making old maps. So she created all these buckets of tea. And I then was getting the Google Meet things from the school, like hundreds of emails. You've missed your Google meeting. Is your daughter doing this? Is your daughter doing that? And I actually just started crying. And I wrote to the school and said, I don't know who's meant to be teaching my kids, but I am trying to keep my house. And she wrote back to me and said, you know, send your kids to the supervised site. So my kids ended up going with essential workers to the supervised site. So my year started like that, very hard. But I also, you know, acknowledge that a lot of other people had it a lot harder. A lot of people did lose their jobs and so forth. So look, it's been a hard year in a lot of ways, but also I think I've learned a lot from it as well. And I do feel very loved and supported by my community. And I do sometimes feel like if you lean on your community and the people around you, things do come through for you. So I did find new work. I figured out who the people were that were close to me. I got a lot of support. So look, I feel really lucky, to be honest with you, but it has been a hard year, not just for me, but for a lot of people.
Absolutely. And thank you so much, Ginger, for sharing that. And Jessica's also made a comment, you know, you're describing my life. We all lived this year. We really experienced so many challenges. And so, Lyndall, I'm really interested to kind of, you know, we've lived it, but what's the big impact for 2020 and on women overall?
Well, I think you have to say impacts, Heidi. There isn't just one thing. And you know, if I was going to go right up high, I'd say what 2020 has shown us is how absolutely important women are, how much they are on the front line of everything our society needs and our economy needs to keep running. And those two things have also shown us how unequal women are in both those places. That as I think Yvette pointed out really clearly, the cleaning and the caring work that happens in the home unpaid and outside the home badly paid were actually the pillars of the response to the pandemic, as were the way to engage with the community and talk to them about what was happening to them. And so I'm the director of the Research School of Population Health, and people from my school were actually working out there in the community doing the contact tracing. And the thing that makes the difference when all this was happening was the way those women were able, mostly women, not all women, but mostly they were able to engage with others in a kind and caring way to ask them about where they'd been. So all these qualities that women bring in their homes and in their working lives were absolutely drawn on to the maximum, which is kind of what Ginger was saying. And that is a point at which that's both something to honour and value, but there's also a cost, and the cost is showing up in some of the statistics around mental health and well-being, the jump in work and family conflict, the increased rates of women feeling lonely because they are isolated from the support. So one of the things women do is that they give a lot of support to others and they rely on that support. They are the kind of care network, not just in families, but in their workplaces, right across the communities. And so they were doing more, but often receiving less in this process of the pandemic. It also made us realise, I think, that this year more than any year, the myth that home places are somehow separate from workplaces has had to have been put to bed once and for all. The assumption that you come to work and that somehow all the other things that are important to your life are no longer there is clearly shown to be wrong once employers wanted people to use their home places as their workplace. So suddenly the home place became a valued place, a useful place, an economic place. And we need to hang on to that because it's true. And that intersection between what people are doing at work and at home is so important. And it's one of the reasons why women are under so much pressure, because it's not acknowledged and it's not dealt with and it's not accommodated. So as Yvette talked about the big jump, and Ginger talked about, it wasn't just that women tried to do their jobs, but they were also doing even more of the caring, the schooling, the managing in the family. They were looking after sick people. They were trying to manage and negotiate a wholly, completely different environment. And all of that takes time. And all of that takes mental effort. And every single human being only has 24 hours every day. There's absolutely, you can't go and have credit in time or draw on it. You've only got that. So once you reach that limit, what people do is they start to trade off their health and well-being. A lot of women did that. They stopped looking after themselves because they simply had to. So what this year, I mean, you know, I can give you some statistics about the actual jump in the workloads for women. But if you think of 24 hours, women's, you know, their hours increased by, on average, several every single day as a response to this pandemic, and they were already too busy. So what we saw is that women were actually confronting an almost impossible predicament between trying to manage the extra workloads at home while holding down, if they can, jobs. Many of them had jobs that it put even more pressure on them because they were frontline, or they were then confronted in jobs where they were worried about losing their income. So, you know, I think I mean, maybe we can talk a bit more about some of the lessons learned here, but it really, to me, was a year that was all about women and showed us, if you like, the cracks that are there in women's lives that we have not yet really tackled as in terms of policy, in terms of communities.
Thank you so much. And it's been, I guess, astonishing to see the numbers really paint the picture. But I think you're right in terms of recognising that a lot of those experiences, a lot of those cracks were there before COVID, and COVID really highlighted them and truly allowed us to be more aware. And we'll definitely be talking about, you know, what's next in terms of, now that we really know this and we've really got that backing, is how do we make sure we move forward together as a community into 2021 and beyond. So, Helen, I'd love to jump to you now, you know, in particular as someone who still went into the workforce, in particular on the front line. And I mean, thank you so much for your contribution to the community this year in particular and always. But I guess the lines have really blurred, and Lyndall did sort of touch on this, is what does the household and for you, your workplace look like in 2020?
Yeah, I'd like to thank you for inviting me along. From the point of view, I'm a hospital cleaner. So from the point of view of me, I found, and so did some of my colleagues that I've spoken to, very up and down emotionally. Like, you're grateful you've got a job, you're grateful your job's not going anywhere because of the pandemic, it can't. But then on the other hand, you're very concerned about your home life, your family. From my point of view, I have a mum at home who has early emphysema. So you're sort of torn because you're very conscious that you're in a place where you could possibly come into contact with this. Do you want to be taking that home? I also had a uni daughter who was trying to do uni online, and that was just a horrific experience for her. She coped, but it was horrific for her. So you're trying to help support everybody at home. My husband does night shift, so it was very strange in that regard. And for part of the pandemic, he was at home, part of it he wasn't. So it was really tricky. The mental thing was horrible because a lot of family interstate, don't get to see them. So from that point of view, very hard. We had a good supportive network at work, but we did find, like, we're all very pedantic in our job, but there was even more pressure. You sort of felt more pressure to be on point all the time, it can be difficult. You know, we're all very conscious and very conscientious about our jobs, but it can put that pressure on you because you're even more mindful of, don't make a mistake, make sure you get this right, make sure you follow the procedures, and we had a lot more critics than normal. From the point of view of the public coming into the hospital who would normally see you, like, we had a lot of support and a lot of thanks for being cleaners, and that was fantastic because we don't normally get that. But then on the other hand, you also had people coming in and they'd say, oh, well, you've just used a cloth on 8 chairs, not understanding the system of an 8-fold with a cloth that it can be done a certain way. So then we had to change the way that particular job was done. So there's just little nuances like that. And there were different jobs that were picked up this time by us. Like, we didn't used to clean buses or ambulances, but now with the pandemic, if there was anything that was a possible COVID, we went in. Some of our team went in to clean. So it was just I found it a very emotional roller coaster of a ride across the whole time it's been on. It's lessened a bit as time's gone, as we've got more educated and know more, and it's still scary, but not as scary. But I also had other thoughts too. I'm a working mum. I'm lucky that I have a child who's older, but I have other people who I know who have young children, who they were trying to educate as well as run a job. So they were like having other stresses put on them apart from the stress of working where we are, the stress of trying to run a home life and keep their kids educated when they were in lockdown from the schools, because they still wanted to do things because they had a partner at home. So they were trying to still, but then you had single parents as well who found it very tough because they didn't have as much support network. So we were trying to all reach out to each other as best we could and, just touch base with each other as best we could. So from that point of view, it was good, but moving forward. And the other thing too, I don't want to sound like I'm complaining because I'm not, but in the situation we're in, because of where we're working, if you've got any slight bit of illness, especially with the pandemic running around, you can't be in the workplace. So therefore, you're using up a bit more sick leave probably than you would normally use, but you still only have the same quantity of sick leave. So then we're not paid at the highest end of town. So you sort of juggle a bit more with your finances as well. So so just through that, and I found I'm a delegate for the United Workers Union, and I found them a great support, as well as the colleagues at work with supporting each other. They were good to touch base with and just sort of help out. You know, we found some people that were struggling, so we put together some funds to help with food and things like that through at the start, when we were still trying to work out who was going to get paid from where, that weren't in the actual hospital cleaning, but were in other areas that had shut down. So from that point of view, that's, I think, where the union can be really important too, because to give that voice to the people at the low end of town who, you know, need that extra support. And also just from the mental point of view, it'd be nice to have a bit more of that in there somewhere as well. I think I actually did go do an online one about, you know, part of the way into it, because I was carrying a bit of a work injury as well. So that was playing on me mentally as well. And I found it good to a point, because it was a phone conference. I was phone conferencing with someone somewhere else. And I found it good to a certain point, and then it got to a point where it was like, it sounded very, this is how it'll be, go online, look at this, look at that. It wasn't as personal. So that, you know, that then you, but yeah, you just seesaw mentally through the whole thing. So if we can sort of come up with a way to get more support for everybody across the board, especially with the frontline people as well as the people who are out of work, you know, across the board for women, would be great.
Yeah, thank you so much, Helen. And certainly thinking about, and it wasn't something that I'd considered in terms of, so in my experience, I have a husband who's immune suppressed. So everyone finally having the, I guess, the capacity to go home when they were unwell and work from home made a huge difference to us. And my husband, for the very first time in probably about 8 years, did not get an infection this year, and did not go into hospital because of an infection. But you know, when you think about people who still had to show up to that front line, you know, there wasn't their capacity for them to do that work at home. And you know, it's a really interesting you know, challenge for people when they don't have that sick leave, and they don't have the permission, I guess, to be able to be cautious. But again, thank you so much for being on the panel, and really fascinating to hear your thoughts and your experiences. So Ginger, I might just jump back to you, and I want to talk a little bit more about that blurring of the lines, because it's really made a lot of us feel very guilty about the experiences that we've been having and trying to juggle. You know, what has that looked like for you and the people around you?
You're on mute, Ginger.
Sorry, I just made the classic COVID mistake, didn't I, of being on mute? Totally love that. I'm the first one to do it. Look, like Lyndall was saying, women have just been under huge pressure in this period. And I mean, I was lucky in a sense because I was used to working from home. So you know, my life and my home life, my work life and home life were already integrated. But it was really interesting, Heidi. So I host a podcast for the Academy of the Social Sciences, and I'm interviewing a lot of Australia's best social scientists. And some of the COVID research around gender has been absolutely fascinating. So Professor Lynn Craig in Melbourne is an expert in the division of domestic labour. And what she found was going on inside the homes of heterosexual couples. So she's still going to bring out research on same-sex couples. But she found that men were doing slightly more domestic work, okay, so maybe like an hour and a half more. This is in lockdown. But then they were really angry about it. They were doing a tiny bit of they were seeing a tiny bit of what women normally experience in a domestic relationship where you've got a heterosexual couple, but they were mad. Their life dissatisfaction went up huge. So I found that actually quite depressing research, because then it made me wonder if this domestic stuff and the division of labour and the issues that women have with being overburdened with all the things Lyndall was talking about is actually intractable, if they are so angry that they're just doing a tiny bit of what we are normally shouldering. And also I interviewed Professor Kim Rubenstein. So she's an expert in kind of women's participation in public life. And she was noting that the women like Helen are on the front line. They're doing the actual frontline work of the pandemic, and yet who is on television? We were seeing these reams of white old men making these decisions about what we should be doing. And so that stuff is really difficult. Like in some ways, our lives, our work lives and our home lives got really blurred. But in another way, it really showed up the deeply entrenched misogyny and sexism that is already in society. And women just ended up absolutely crushed under it, I mean, what happened for me was a bit different because I split the care with my ex-husband. He ended up having the kids 50% of the time immediately, and things did get better for me. But I know for a lot of people, they were worrying about elderly parents, women. They were the women who were being talked about in my podcast were at the kitchen table trying to write academic papers or trying to do their job, trying to homeschool the kids. And quite often the husband had gone into the bedroom to do his seemingly more important work and shut the door. So she was there, still trying to hold down a job and teach 2, 3, 4 kids. And he was there doing his more important work in the bedroom. So look, this was an incredibly tough time. It is no wonder that women's mental health is really suffering. And also the brunt of the job losses were women, weren't they? Because women are in more insecure work. So we're in more part-time work, we're in lower paid work. Our jobs are more insecure because we are already in caring roles. So it's like, it just felt like a real sort of cyclone of difficult stuff. So yeah, there was a lot of guilt, a lot of exhaustion, a lot of more stuff we were already feeling. So yeah, look, it's been a hard year for a lot of people.
So Nip, you are running a small business that delivers face-to-face. What's this year been like for you, and how did you focus on what you were able to achieve or what you were able to learn and not what you were missing out on?
Yeah, it's been a wild ride. I totally resonate with Ginger and kind of say it's an absolute shit show. And, cast our minds back to March where no one knew what was happening. I remember one weekend, my mum was like, my sisters and I were going to go out to a bar and like what we would normally do on a Saturday night, go out for dinner. And she was like, you really shouldn't go out. There's this virus. It's a big deal. You really shouldn't go out. And this was like the first week of March. And we laughed and we were like, no way, no virus could ever have anything didn't even know what a pandemic was, I don't think. And so off we went to a few, Canberra hotspots. And of course, the Monday morning, there were reports all over the Canberra Times, the first case of COVID, he went to this festival and this bar and this festival and this bar. And we were all like, oh my God. And then slowly but surely in the next 2 weeks, it just deteriorated and deteriorated and deteriorated. And then eventually everything got stopped. And, I was getting meeting requests and things that were all of a sudden getting cancelled and trips getting cancelled and speaking gigs getting cancelled and all of this stuff. And then, of course, never mind our florist income, it just kind of totally dwindled. And all of our corporate work and all of our corporate accounts, they just were just going, we're not having events anymore, we're not having conferences, cancel. And it was just crazy. And that was, for that time, I just thought, oh my God, we're never going to get out of this. This is going to be awful. What a time to be in a small business. And then, of course, things like JobKeeper kicked in and we were able to offer our staff structure and stability and pay. And, we're an NDIS provider, so we also have that unstable economy of work, of support work is often a casualized workforce. And we had participants that were immunocompromised that perhaps were going into lockdown with their families, and support workers that so badly needed, work and wanted to work, but also they were scared to be on the front line with our participants, not wondering what's happening. So it was such an awful, awful time. But I'm kind of proud to say that we came out the other side. We all have a job. If not, we've kind of got better. Our processes got better. We got more efficient, and our florist business, everyone couldn't see anyone. Shops weren't open, so they were all ordering flowers and gift hampers to everyone, and it was awesome. So yeah, really grateful that we're kind of still standing.
That's amazing. And yeah, definitely a very great time to send someone some flowers, everybody, and, support an incredible local business like Gigi's. And just, it's incredible to hear that story of what you've gone through this year, and grateful that you're coming out the other end as an incredible organisation. So I think one of the things that we talked about in that very first sort of video was, how do we become better communicators? How do we ask for help when we need it? How do we have that conversation? So I'm really interested to open this up to all of our panel members in what are your tips in terms of starting that conversation and ask for help or time with your loved ones or with the people that you live with or have to negotiate with. I might throw to Ginger first. You've come off mute.
The thing I was thinking about when you first talked to me, Heidi, about having conversations was more around the conversations I suddenly had to have with my children about, do other people make us sick, Mum? Why can't we see Nan? And it came off the back of the fires. So they were very anxious about, is this the apocalypse? Like climate change, the pandemic, what kind of future are we going to have? So I've got a 10 and a 7-year-old, and I speak to them often like adults. And so I was doing a lot of thinking about, what did the pandemic actually give us that was good, like slowing down, connecting with our community, supporting other people around us. How can we do things that help? Like my kids and I just had a lemonade stand because they wanted to do something about climate change because they're worried about, So the conversations I was having with loved ones were not so much about asking other people for help, because I have a really strong community, but I was doing things with the kids, like we were making cookies for lots of people that we love and dropping them on their doorsteps, because I was teaching them about community. And I was teaching them about why you need to support other people, especially in a time like a pandemic, and being kind, and why that's so important. And I think Hugh McKay, my podcast, talked to me a lot about the rebooting of community, like neighbours dropping lemons on each other's doorsteps and getting groceries for each other and medications for elderly people. And, people I know were putting toilet paper in the street libraries so other people could get it. So I was more thinking about how do we bring up resilient children so that they can get other people and themselves through the pandemic. In terms of me asking for help, I didn't really need to ask for help because I have a very tight-knit community and it was almost spontaneously given to me. So those things were hard. I did spend quite a bit of time trying to support my mother, who's elderly and lived around the corner, and she was very worried about being lonely. And so I was doing things like going around to her house with a gin, and I would ring her through the window and stand miles away with my gin, and we'd have our gin together and sort of shout at each other through the window. So those were more the conversations I was having, Heidi, rather than feeling like I needed to ask people for help. I was more trying to work out, how do I bring up my children so they still feel safe and secure and loved, even though there is this kind of huge existential threat upon us.
And that's, such an important thing in particular for mental health of young people, is their whole world change. We felt our whole world change, but, I'm very involved in netball and having it just cancelled in a day. And I spend most of my life at netball. So, just those incredibly important connections that young people have were just taken away immediately, and being able to communicate with very young people, even through to teenagers and young adults, in terms of what are the coping strategies that we put in place with change, and how do we get through the next day. And certainly jump onto MIEACT's website. We launched during lockdown Stress and Me, which is a program for Year 5 to Year 9 students. And you go through a whole bunch of things around learning about stress, worry, and anxiety, and putting together your stress response plan at the end of it that you can print out and put up on the fridge and do together. So it was certainly a great tool for young people to be able to use to better understand and put some things in place. So for Helen, how did that work for you in terms of conversations and maybe asking for help?
From our point of view, where we were, we had a pretty good rapport going with our bosses. But for the people who were too scared to speak up, that was where I sort of took a bit of a role as a union delegate on the site to say to them, look, if you've got any issues, you can come to me, I can support you, we as a group. Because when you're working as a group, you can get support. Whereas, if you're doing it on your own, you can't sort of walk up to a boss and say one-on-one because that might not be as receptive. So to come together as a group of, us girls got together, and if there was something we weren't sure of or something that needed to change or, something that needed to be addressed, we went in as a group to sort of, we had the support of each other to talk about issues or to get things moving going forward. So how we keep that going, I'm hoping that we stay strong in that respect to keep things, but to make improvements. I'd like to, that's one of the reasons I'm part of this today, I hope, just to try and come up with plans moving forward. So if ever we have this again, or just for women in general in the workplace, especially where we are, because we're a low income end of town. So it's good to have that backup from the union and that to move forward if there's issues that can affect women, to try and fight for change, to have that group support. So hopefully, fingers crossed, going forward we can get that going and just, from the mental point of view, come up with solutions mentally to support more and to support each other more going forward. Yeah.
And that's really powerful in recognising that while we felt quite isolated and alone through this year, we've also experienced a lot of things together. And I think that's powerful in terms of having conversations even with the person next to you to go, is this the same thing that you're going through? And then walking forward together and power by numbers. So certainly hoping that can continue to move forward into 2021 and beyond. So Lyndall, I just want to talk a little bit about the stress load. So we've talked about certainly an increase in the real load and the reality of the load for women in particular. But on top of that, we were all living in a threat state. We were living in a worry of a pandemic, not knowing, what was going to happen next, uncertainty and concern. And when we're living in that state, we need a lot more energy to be able to complete those daily tasks. So what does that mean for our community, for women, and also, what does that mean for people who are usually high performers as well?
Thanks, Heidi. I just want to pick up on a couple of things that Ginger and Helen talked about, because I think you could think about this year as a collective trauma. And it wasn't just the pandemic, although that has to say that is a global trauma. It was the bushfires, it was catastrophic bushfires. We got hit with a hailstorm. I mean, it just kept coming. And what traumas harm, but the way out of a trauma is to ask, what can I learn from it? That is one of the most healing pieces of a trauma, is to ask at a personal level, at a collective level, what can we learn? And when people think, what can I learn, that gives them a way forward and gives them hope. So in my view, this year is a moment where we have to say, what can we learn from this year? In all the, if you like, its traumatic facets, because that is our hope for changing the world for better. And that is the question. And even at a personal level as well as a kind of community level as well as a global level. So I also just want to comment on the idea of asking for help, because obviously it's hard to ask for help, because often asking for help implies that somehow you're less than or not coping, or not up to it. Actually, I think what women need to do is ask for fairness, and that it isn't really help, it's fairness that they need, and that we need to reframe how women pitch their requests to their workplaces, to the government, and even to their partners as one of a question of fairness. Understanding that partners and workplaces and governments have all got constraints as well. But in my view, it's very important to start to reframe women's position to be one of actually stepping into, actually it's not about me changing myself, it's about the other people starting to change themselves out of fairness. And that to me is the important conversation we need to have at every single level of our society. So there's those bits of it. Back to the mental load. So one of the things that I think is really clear about mental load, it's about how much you're doing, and it's also about how much you're not doing. And it's that combination of doing a lot and also being aware or worried or concerned about what you're not doing. And that combination creates the mental distress. And that combination happens because women have got too much to do. And that's it. It's a simple fact. There is 24 hours in a day. Most working days in full-time jobs are longer than 8 hours, and care work and domestic work and housework, looking after other people's emotional needs, particularly when they're young, is far longer than 8 hours. There's just too much to do because that's how we've structured our 24 hours in this society, and we need to change it. So women do have it's a real problem. It's not a problem of that they make up, or a problem it's fabricated. It's not a problem. It's not neurotic. It's not any of those things. It's a simple, unfeasible day, which this year has shown how important. I mean, how unfeasible it is once you start to expand it. Women are sort of fitted into what's unfeasible, and then this year it fell over because it just became that much more unfeasible for so many women. So the mental load then has consequences for women's mental health. And our research has shown that work and family conflict is as much a driver of poor mental health as almost any other factor. It's up there with relationship conflict and relationship breakdown. And what we can see is that women who move into work-family conflict, mental health goes down. When they move out of it, it improves. If they don't have much of it, they're doing the best. If they have it for long term, they're doing the worst in terms of mental health. So are men actually, and we forget that men actually have really high conflict between their work and their family life, often because they are in the high-paid, long-hour jobs, and that job absolutely stops them picking up the load. So to me, a lot of the fairness goes back to the workplace and what we're expecting workers to do. And they have the same problem with their mental health. And furthermore, all of that creates pressure on the whole family. So it's actually not just a woman's problem. It's a family problem. It's a social problem. It's an economic problem. And I will say one of the things that I think is really exciting about this year is that government has finally connected those two dots. They realised that this pandemic was not simply about something that happened to people's bodies, it affected people's minds. And they got that. And I think mental health became so clear as a focus for government policy and began to be seen as something that changes with circumstances. It's not just simply a genetic problem or a personality problem, it's a problem of circumstance. And so something that governments have finally really learned that it is a problem of circumstance, and they need to address our circumstances if they want to help our mental health. So they're the kind of thoughts I'm having about what that mental load means. It's quite clear that when women's mental load reduces, their mental health improves. So actually at a kind of, if you like, at an intervention level, if we could actually make it easier for women, we would see a palpable impact in women's wellbeing and their children's. So there's a place where we could act as a community as well as instead of as a government, and workplaces are really integral to that, because it is that clash between work and care that is one of the big drivers for women these days anyway.
It's very profound, and completely true. It's really I'm almost speechless. I just think it's really incredible to hear your thoughts, but they just really resonate. And ask for fairness. It just is so simple, but it's certainly something that we need to continue doing, and everybody in this forum, making sure that that's, an amazing takeaway that we can have. I just do want to do another little shout out for MIEACT, of course. That's why I got to sit in this seat. We do actually have an online trauma awareness program, and it's self-paced and something that you can do in your own time, but something that we felt was very important this year to build the skills of our community about identifying and recognizing the importance of early help seeking when it comes to trauma. And definitely give us a follow on Facebook, where we've been sharing quite a lot over the last couple of weeks on what trauma is, and how you might be able to identify it in both yourself, but also the people that are around you. A very important skill set for us moving forward. And so that ties really nicely into the next part, which is, so workplaces are a key place that we need to really think about women. We really need to be able to consider what we can do to reduce that mental load, and also we know that people are more productive in the sense, or successful and thrive, whichever buzzword you'd like to throw in there, in terms of what they can achieve in the workplace as well. So Nip, you're a small business owner, but you've got a big team of employees. So what have you been able to put in place for your workplace to support that balance?
Yeah, it's been kind of vast and varying. So I think, first and foremost, at the start of the pandemic, it was giving them that reassurance that we were going to be here, and they were going to, we're going to try very hard to keep everyone employed, and given that we were an essential service, we're going to continue no matter what. It was then that I realized that we needed to offer EAP. So we got EAP, which was a really good kind of wraparound to being able to provide counselling support for our staff. We then, as most people on the front line, they need to do like supervision. So we put in a behavioural therapist that would come in and do some group supervision with us. And then the one that I absolutely adore is we run monthly training, skill development for our support workers, behaviour therapy training for our participants that are at risk. And we also do something really fun and do self-care. So I actually had Heidi join us at DG's HQ to do laughing yoga, and our staff adored it. It was so much fun. And so, that's what they did. They engaged in laughter yoga with Heidi, and we also had a guest speaker, and we talked about the amazing work that MIEACT did. And, stuff like that was such a great value add for my staff. And, we then had drinks and dinner together, and it just kind of formed a really great afternoon where everyone just really felt appreciated and, accepted, and everything that's so important that we all need as humans from our workplace.
I'm a woman of many talents. You never know what you might get when I come in to run a session. But I mean, we can't underestimate the power of laughter. Absolutely. We can't underestimate, in particular this year, the power of connection, and having more opportunities to do that. And what I love that you've implemented at your workplace is the structural stuff that is there to catch people when they need it, but also the preventative stuff. And that's sometimes what we can miss out on in workplaces, is we really focus on the stuff that'll catch you if you fall. But what about, building our people and building our communities with the strategies that they can put in place early, the things that they can do day by day. And self-care, I often come out with the fact that we think self-care is actually crisis pampering. So something happens and I go get a mani-pedi, that's crisis pampering. Self-care is something that we deliberately do every day, that we allocate time for and we commit to it. And we certainly make sure that we do it, and it has that overall effect in filling our cup up, recharging the batteries, and allowing us to continue getting through even just that day. So I'd really like to, we're running into time. So what I'd like to do is just ask each panelist to give us one strategy that they put in place to take care of themselves. And when we hear ideas of what people find works for them, we can be inspired to create the things that we can put in place ourselves. And then we will have sort of an informal 20 minutes of continuing to chat with the panel. So Nip, can I start? What's your one self-care strategy that you put in place to take care of you?
So I have very many, but my first, some of them are not as great, maybe, as some include alcohol, but I reckon the one that like kind of just really has kept me at an even slate every day is I go to the gym every morning, and you know that, so I found the pandemic so hard because the gym to me isn't just about going and exercising, it's about that social connection, it's about having accountability, it's about all of that. So the gym is my one.
Great. And Helen, what's yours?
Well, for me, it was a twofold thing. At home, apart from communicating with my family and just having a laugh over something stupid, watching something stupid on Netflix, or I became a junkie of Asian, really disgustingly terrible dramas, soapies, romantic soapy things, because it was just something stupid and something I had to read a lot because it's all subtitled. But it was just great because it just gave a release of something different. And at work, like little groups of us would get together, like, and with our social distancing, we didn't do the wrong thing, but we would get together and if anyone was stressed out or if there was something stupid going, we'd absolutely take the mickey out of it together as a group, just to release, just to go, well, that happened, well, we did this, but no, we did this, and we try and outdo each other, and then we'd let loose, we'd let go, like, you know, in our tea break, and we'd let go and we just get it off our chest so that you had somewhere to let some of it go, because there were times when it was super stressful, really, really stressful. So we just did silly things like that sometimes and had a laugh.
Great. Yeah, I'm certainly running out of things on Netflix, so I certainly can appreciate that. So, Lyndall, what's your strategy?
Well, like Pip, I've got quite a few, some of which I should say in public and some I probably shouldn't say. But I think I'm an absolute sook. I love animals, and so for me, it's that going out and being with my animals makes this huge difference to me. And so, apart from my cat, who I spend quite a lot of time with, I have a horse. And I just adore her. She's an absolute honey of an animal. And I love going out there, just fiddling around with her and cleaning out paddocks and being in nature. And it was that connection with animals, with their very beautiful, kind souls that has kept me going this year.
That's amazing. Yep, my fur baby definitely got me through too. And Ginger, what's yours? You're on mute again.
I'm doing well today, aren't I? So I was doing all of those things, the Netflix, the exercise, walking outside. But the thing that really helped me at the beginning of the pandemic was I had this female chat group on Facebook called Cheeky Chicks. It was sometimes pretty naughty, I will say, but there was a lot of memes in there. There was a lot of hilarity. There was a lot of just supporting each other, talking about what we're going through. And there was often a daily photo challenge, which could also be quite inappropriate. And it was just a lot of fun. So I felt like my community was around me, even though they weren't physically present, and we laughed a lot as well. So that really kept us going in that tricky time.
Absolutely. And I think one of the messages that I would share is we don't get self-care right every day, and we shouldn't be too hard on ourselves when we don't get it right. But just it's that try. So try the next day. And maybe try a little bit. So that's one of the things, is sometimes it can be really hard to fit it in. Just try and don't be too hard on yourself if you don't get it. So I'd really like to just throw to Hannah to just give us a final little video from the team here at MIEACT in some of the strategies that we like to put in place and to take care of ourselves and to take care of the people around us as well.
whenever I'm practicing self-care. If I'm just on my phone and I'm sitting on the couch and one of the family approaches me, but I know that this is a moment where I actually need to have my own headspace, I say it out loud. I say, I just need you to give me a few more minutes. I'm just in my own space at the moment. I did start drinking more than I was. And so I actually just decided this is a great opportunity just to give drinking up altogether. I did that a few weeks into lockdown and it's been 6 months now, and I do actually feel I have a sense of accomplishment.
I would try very hard not to put so much pressure on myself to be the best at everything, because it's quite often not possible. But explaining that to my children, explaining that to my employer really assisted. So increasing my communication and being able to say, look, I had to put my child first in that instance, or saying to my husband, you really need to help me out here because I need to put work first right now.
One day I just said to myself, I always thought I wasn't able to paint or to draw at all. So I just bought, a set of watercolors, went home and tried to do some color mixing, a little bit of painting. And I just found that it gives me a lot of peace. I had to find the way to say to myself, you cannot control that. That's the situation they're in. And the only support that I could give them was a probably daily call.
Just make sure that both of us are laughing. If both of us have laughed by the end of the day, then I think I've done my job.
I communicate really openly with my partner. So I just tell him what I need. I'm working and I'm also caring for the children. So I say, this is what I need you to do. And we sit down and we chat about it. We really try and focus on the positive things that we're doing. I'll say to him, thanks so much for cooking dinner. I know you were really stressed with work. I recognise when he's done something really great, and he does the same for me. I think in our society, a lot of people say, let me know if I can give you a hand. And I actually started taking them up on the offer.
It was about halfway through when I kind of stopped caring. Sorry, I'll rephrase that. I didn't stop caring. I stopped putting so much pressure on myself to make sure that everything that they were given. We kind of stopped worrying so much. The beautiful thing about Canberra is that a walk in the bush is only 2 minutes away, basically, from where anyone lives. So we found ourselves outside a lot.
So taking care of you is as unique as you are. So that's an important thing, to take some ideas from that particular video, from the incredible strategies that our panelists have shared with us, and make it what would work for you, or just try things out and see where you get to from there. So this comes to the end of our formal part of this session, and we do have a little bit of time left for if anyone would like to ask any questions of our panel. So please feel free to drop any questions into and I can across. Maybe while we just wait for that one, I might just maybe ask Lyndall, what do we need to advocate to keep after 2020?
Well, I think we could advocate to keep that visibility of women. So what we saw was that women were so important, and actually suddenly childcare became free, even briefly, as in recognition of women's importance. We need to keep that. We need to make women's lives easier. Because actually there's absolutely brilliant work done in the US called Structural Sexism and Health. And what she shows is that in places that treat women better, it's not just that women's health improves, everyone's health improves. Mm-hmm. So it's not an either or here. Actually, by making women's lives better, you make everyone's lives better. And that's been shown also in developing countries, that the way to improve health and wellbeing is to educate mothers. It's that easy. Mm. So this has shown us that actually we could do a lot to make this a better society if we make sure we make it easier for women in terms of what they're facing, and ask workplaces to rethink how they treat homes, not as an impediment or an annoyance or a barrier to work, but actually as a partnership. And that workplaces need to partner with families about how we undertake work and care, because it is actually a partnership. They need families need work. It's a partnership. And so rather than seeing them as kind of an annoyance or an add-on or as a problem that workplaces have to accommodate to, it's actually to change the way we think about work and family as two key pieces of our social system. And that's something we really need to do, because we have seen that we've basically moved a lot of work into the home places, and everyone's gone, okay, we'll do that. People have opened up their home places to workplaces. I'd like to see the same come back. This is about, again, asking for fairness.
Yeah. And I think your point on the childcare is, we are literally disadvantaging people to coming back to work in a time that they would like to come back. And, as soon as you balance the childcare fees with your salary, at the end of the day, you work out, is this worth it? And that shouldn't be the question that a mother has on the return to work. It should be, this is what I actually would like to do, and I know that my child is cared for. And certainly leading an organisation, having a number of women in our organisation who have young children is, that's a difficult conversation that we're having to have, and that society is placing us in, rather than I'd like to decide how many days I'd like to work and what interaction I'd like to have, and not have a fiscal barrier that determines that for you.
And a piece of that is actually what Yvette signalled, that it's not just any old childcare, it's good childcare. And Ginger talked about that guilt. It's good childcare.
Yeah.
And good childcare is a win-win. So it is about empowering those workers, paying them properly, making that a national resource, because it is for the next generation.
And can I just say, with off the back of what Lyndall's saying in regards to free childcare, like, it's not just a favour to women that you offer free childcare. It's actually something that's going to benefit the whole society. Like, the Grattan Institute found that if we put 5 billion into childcare, there's 10 billion that we're going to increase the GDP by. So it's actually a very strong economic argument. And the other thing I wanted to say, Heidi, is in terms of what we need to keep flexible work. Like, for ages, structurally, workplaces have been holding on to this ideal of the 1950s worker man for no good reason. They've been resisting all requests for flexible work. They see it as a women's domain. We've just shown on a global scale, because of this huge external shock, that actually any of us can work flexibly at home. Productivity doesn't go down. There's not actually a good argument for resisting it. So I think that's a huge global learning from this that we need to hang on to, because it benefits all of us if we can have workplaces that are flexible, that work around us and our families.
I think that's an absolutely really important point. And what does flexibility look like? And Helen, I'm interested in your perspective, as a union delegate, is even a lot of our awards are set up in a way, that a very long time ago created structures. How do we navigate that now, in that traditional workspace isn't what we work in anymore?
Yeah, well, I think it comes down to, we've got to have, as you girls said, more flexibility with the lower and safer workloads. But having a part-time workload doesn't mean you do part-time pay but still do the same amount of work.
Absolutely.
Change, you've got to, and like, from my point of view, being in the industry I'm now 56 years old. I've got to work another 11 years doing a physical job. That's when flexibility has to come in, because you have to have a more balanced workload to keep going, because you're older, your body doesn't work at the same rate as it did when you were younger. So therefore, I think it's very important to have that, and have the job security around it too, not just as casuals, as permanent part-time and permanent full-time, so that you've got that certainty of your work environment as well, with proper pay, recognise the positions for what they are and pay better. as well. You know, why should women, just because we're doing a lot of the lower end jobs, be on such low pay, have more equal pay?
And certainly has a longer term impact into our retirement as well, where you're working part-time and not contributing as much to super. We know that impact that it has on the other end. And so, Nip, what about you? What are you advocating to keep after 2020?
Look, I think it's crazy, right? Because anyone that knows GGs will know that often my little sister Guyana would do a hug with all her deliveries. So you can bet your bottom dollar that was stamped out pretty quick with COVID. But I suppose it's that, you know, we were able to keep all these people employed during the pandemic, and it kind of highlighted the importance of work. Like, you know, we talk about how work needs to be flexible and everything like that, but I mainly work with people that are often unemployed, and the structure of having work and having a purpose and having something to come to is a pillar for a lot of people's mental health and their physical health and all of that. So, you know, my commitment to our community is to ensure that people with a disability, I provide as much structure as possible through my workplace so that we can continue to employ people that would otherwise be unemployed. So for me, I think it's just, you know, moving to that flexible workforce, but also as an employer, really taking charge with people's, you know, mental health, and, you know, providing all the things that need to be provided to an employee to have a really positive and supportive workplace, so that what they choose to do with that is up to them, but it's all there. And we've really tried our very best to ensure that that is provided to them. And I think without the pandemic, I probably wouldn't have really highlighted the necessity of it. And I suppose, you know, it's like rushing women's syndrome. You're just rushing. And so then finally we kind of all stopped. And while I didn't get to make bread and cakes during the lockdown, I felt like I worked the whole time. It was really good to kind of stop and just take stock of what's been happening.
Yeah, we certainly can't underestimate what being employed does offer us in a whole range of ways. And I certainly recognise that my husband was on leave without pay for 2.5 years in the lead up to a double lung transplant. And the day that he got ready for work and went back into the workforce is a day I'll never forget. And just how that made him feel in having some capacity, some interaction with someone other than me and other than nurses, but also in that, you know, his own wage and his own, you know, ability to contribute to, you know, what he does. And I'll just never underestimate the value of having employment. You know, whether it's a good day or bad day in the office, you know, it really sort of comes down to that gratitude of being employed, and how lucky we are to have a society that does have employment. But we also recognise this year in particular, a huge amount of our workforce got cut. So thank you so much. This has just been such an incredible afternoon, and what a great lunch break. I just want to thank all of our panelists for being so compassionate, and thank you so much for sharing your experiences and your expertise in today's session. I can speak definitely on behalf of everybody who has attended this session. I've learnt so much. And I know that we can certainly move forward as a strong women's body into 2021 and beyond. So thank you everybody for joining us. Please do jump onto the MIEACT website to learn more about our organisation, our programs that we can come and run for you and your workplace. Follow us on Facebook and LinkedIn to continue the learning and continue that education about mental health and trauma in particular moving forward. And thank you again, everybody, for joining us.
Thank you, Heidi. It's been an honour. Thank you, everybody, for sharing your stories, and everybody for listening. There was all these amazing comments coming through the whole time, so thank you.
Yes, thank you so much. Really
Thanks
wonderful.
for having you. Thanks for being such a generous audience.
Thank you.